More than 60 police officers were called to this Brampton, Ontario property last night, responding to a party that got out of control.
Parents and property owners, you really need to see this.
Imagine planning the perfect high school graduation party only to have it all turn into a disaster. From 50 drunk teenagers getting caught red-handed to rowdy high schoolers destroying a teacher's house. Grab some popcorn as I reveal real high school graduation party stories that ended in disaster. Entitled girl loses it.
How's it going? Whose house?
The owner's inside.
The owner's inside.
Graduation party
We all just graduated a couple weeks ago, came together for this.
from high school?
Yeah.
Okay.
Watching these teenagers die inside after the police showed up to their high school graduation party is just priceless. I mean, straight off the bat, you can tell everyone here is guilty.
Who lives on Brawl?
I do.
You do. Okay. So you gave him permission to have a party while you were gone? Did you give him permission to smoke marijuana in your house?
No, I did not.
I wasn't aware of
Okay.
that.
And during the initial interrogation, one guy even admits how they just graduated high school, meaning they are clearly underage. The dude hosting the party claims he's 21 though, and with mum and dad out of town, this was the perfect opportunity for him to become the most popular guy in town.
Okay, so what's our next step?
At my house.
Because people are just talking,
house.
and
Yeah.
You are 20.
Yeah.
we just need to figure out what we need to do from here.
And while this party wasn't originally meant for teenagers, it got super crazy as around 50 people turned up. Half of them have already dipped, meaning the guy who threw the party is in some serious trouble now. And honestly, if you ask me, I think the police aren't really here to arrest anyone. They just want to make sure everyone gets home safe.
No, I want my dad! I want my dad! I want my dad! Please!
But with an entire group of teenagers drunk out of their minds now on the road, it's obvious this party has turned into a disaster. When the host realizes things aren't going his way, he switches up and starts acting like an officer, admitting how these teenagers should face consequences. I mean, that's pretty hilarious.
Dude, I have handcuffs!
Yelling, you're gonna go to jail.
I have
Listen,
handcuffs on my wrist right
maybe if
now!
you get her out of the handcuffs, she'll calm down.
Please!
Considering how he supplied all the liquor and everything, now here's where the fun starts. One entitled girl loses it and starts to throw all the blame on the host. She refuses to answer any questions and says goodnight to the officer as she heads inside. Unfortunately for her, that's not going to happen, and when things get a little too out of control, the officer is left with no other option than to put her in handcuffs. She's kicking and screaming, repeatedly yelling how she doesn't deserve this. Believe it or not, it gets so bad that the cops eventually have to throw her in the back of the vehicle. Mom arrives on the scene and notices how her daughter has completely lost it.
I didn't do anything!
She doesn't know what to act. She just needs to calm down for the night.
She's refusing, I understand.
It's past a point. We were planning on letting her go, and she kept ratcheting it.
Of course.
You know.
She tries to get her to calm down. But this girl is going nuts. It eventually ends as the police shut the party down and take both the host and this entitled girl into custody. But yeah, in a way, everyone at the party should thank her. She stole all the spotlight and single-handedly saved about 50 people from getting arrested that night. A sea of drunk teenagers. If your mom is a teacher at the high school and everyone hates her, do yourself a favor and never throw a party. Things will get out of hand, and when I say out of hand, I mean it will be an utter disaster. This kid threw a high school graduation party and at least 100 kids showed up. Things got wild pretty fast as these teenagers came on a mission to get blackout drunk. I mean, these kids were drinking like it was the end of the world. It turns out an officer was standing on the staircase, looking down at a sea of drunk teenagers chanting a very specific statement. And the person who shared this story even claims this officer said, "Wow," after seeing the spectacular sight. He gets his walkie-talkie and asks backup to bring a wagon, and that's when disaster unfolds. Everyone starts running, climbing out of windows, crawling between the cops' legs, and breaking doors to get out. The cops have to deploy as many as 60 cars to break up this massive party. But still, the police aren't even able to arrest one kid. Anyway, it's Monday now, and the guy who threw the party is going nuts, asking everyone who broke what. The total damage? $7,000. Drunk behind bars. These high schoolers were all good vibes until they got busted by the 5. Oh, and since more than half of the people didn't even know the host's house, they had no idea how to get out. They eventually started running into the backyard to hop on the fence and escape. But little did they know there was a huge, wet obstacle in their path. There was a pool in the backyard, sealed with a dark cover, and since it was night, some kids couldn't see it was a pool and tried running over it. They all started to fall into the pool, and because there were at least 50 kids in there struggling to climb out, they all got stuck. The funniest part is that multiple high schoolers were caught that night, all because of a pool cover. Off you go. Imagine spending the entire day hyping up a high school grad party only to have it shut down by a cop an hour after it starts. And from the footage alone, you can tell these guys just wanted to have a little fun since there's no alcohol or drugs. All they're doing is having cringe dance battles with TikTok music in the back. And I don't mean any offense by that. I actually think it's 100 times better than underage drinking. But yeah, just as things are about to get lit, a cop car pulls up outside and sounds its sirens. Watching these kids run for their lives is just hysterical. It's a high school grad party by all means, since these are actual high schoolers who've probably never gone to an illegal one. Project X. For those of you who've seen the movie, you probably know what I'm talking about. This footage is wild as it shows more than 100 drugged-out teenagers going berserk at a high school graduation party. Some of the kids get super confrontational when the cops show up, but so far, it seems like everything is under control. The cops stand back and wait for everyone to start going home. But these teenagers aren't about to cut this party short. The entire neighborhood is full of rowdy kids, with some of them playing with a football in the middle of the street. But it all goes wrong when one kid chucks a can at the officers. Everyone makes a run for it as the cops start arresting people. In fact, one group gets in a car and tries to speed off, and that's clearly not happening. I mean, you're already underage, and now you're about to drive under the influence. Real smart, guys. The cops pull them out and get them in cuffs while some of them try to run. The officers chase them down as well as the party finally comes to an end. Illegal party turns into a nightmare. This is footage from an illegal underage party in France, and you can see how the police have had to call in the riot squad to shut it down. They're using smoke bombs to disperse the wild teenagers, but it's clearly not working. I mean, this went from a party to a war in no time, and from the looks of it, the teenagers are actually winning. But yeah, at the end of the day, people get hurt, and that should never happen. Brawl with the cops. Underage drinking is one thing, but brawling with the cops? Now that's something else. You can see several girls kicking the cops, with some of them even trying to grab their weapons. These high schoolers could have easily just gotten off with a warning, but the night ended with 6 of them being arrested for assaulting an officer. House party gone wrong.
Hey, police department!
Go, 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 go. Hey, get on the ground! Get on the ground! Now!
What was supposed to be a quiet house party turned into a nightmare for these kids after the cops showed up and made several arrests. And unlike the other parties, some of these kids were as young as 15 years old. Also, if you're wondering why the police had to make arrests, get a load of this. Along with alcohol and weed, some of the older kids at the party even had firearms. Now that's a terrible mix, and I'm glad the authorities were able to shut this party down before things got ugly. And judging from the house, it seems like it was either an Airbnb or a vacant house trespassed by these kids. Some of these kids really need to learn you are who you hang out with. Just a warning.
Damn, officer, you gotta shut it down.
As outrageous as it sounds, a bunch of these high schoolers even got away with just a warning. I mean, they broke into a vacant house, had alcohol and drugs, and still walked out like they did nothing. Just look at how many kids can be seen coming out of this house and walking off without any consequences. Plus, at one point, an officer even says that they don't want to make any arrests because they'll have to fill out too much paperwork. Honestly, what I think is that you can get away with pretty much anything as long as you have enough people. And even at the end of the clip, when these kids are packing up their equipment, the cops are all smiles and laughs as they let them walk freely.
And I'll be for real, man, because the people that own that house want everybody arrested. And you're the last 3 here. Yeah, dead serious.
They do know this just means they'll do it again, right? Plus, what about all of the drunk teenagers driving to go home? I can just hope they were safe, despite the fact that they were terribly stupid. Corona's in a quarantine zone. When police receive word that there's a high school party going on in a supposed quarantine zone, they rush over to make the bust. And trust me, I get it. Lockdown was hard for everyone. And these are just a bunch of guys having a good time. They're clearly not bothering anyone, but what's with the sign? It's not convincing at all. Anyway, one of the cops starts reading them some laws, but thankfully, and when things look like they're about to escalate a bit, there's an officer who steps in and diffuses the situation. He tells them to wrap it up and not do something like this again. COVID kids.
What's up, guys? Who lives here?
Boys will be boys, right? Well, sometimes they can be incredibly dumb like this lot here. They decided to host a high school graduation party during COVID, but unlike the last clip we saw, all of these guys tested positive. Yep. I'm not making this up. Every kid you see in the clip has tested positive for COVID-19. And just imagine how the cop must have felt when he found out. Anyway, there's not much you can do in this situation, since the only reason an officer showed up is because they were violating quarantine. Apart from that, they're pretty much free to do anything they want since it's private property. I'm amazed how so many of these reckless high schoolers are let off without even a warning. All that trouble for what?
Come here, how old are you?
I'm 15.
Even though these teenagers got caught, I think the dude who organized deserves some credit here. Not only did he go through the trouble of actually renting a house for the grad party, but he also advertised online. Who even does that? That's like inviting the cops to come shut it down. You can tell how all the lights and even the music is shut off, and what that means is these teenagers were trying to lay off in the hopes the cops would just leave. But you guessed it. They were all allowed to leave since they couldn't be charged as adults. Caught red-handed. Imagine being the only one at the party getting arrested. Not only is it the worst feeling ever, but it's like the definition of having the worst luck. Just as the cops showed up to this high school graduation party, this guy tried to hide the can of beer in his pocket, but got caught. When the officer pulled him aside, he pulled out the can and confessed to underage drinking. But this kid thinks he's slick. Along with giving the cops an incorrect name, he tries to make a run for it, only to get tackled down and cuffed. And while all the other kids at this party seem all cool and hip, I bet there are several of them doing the same thing. Looks like this guy really took one for the team, because if it wasn't for him, the entire party could have been raided had these cops called in back up. Boat party gone wrong.
There's a lot of cans floating around here. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?
Nah, so I just got bit by a jellyfish, man.
Yeah, we were just tubing and wakeboarding.
These teenagers are smart. I will give them that much. An illegal party in the middle of the water? Now that's impressive. It'll be pretty easy to dispose of all the liquor and weed. And who cares about pollution? Not these teenagers. But what are they going to do about a snitch? Let's see. A water patrol guard spots this rowdy group of teenagers and decides to go over and check it out. While he wasn't able to catch them red-handed with anything, just from the behavior, it was clear this group was intoxicated. He interrogates them one by one and finally manages to get hold of the organizer. He's also a kid, but because it's his boat, he's going to face the heat. Anyway, the officer lets all the other kids off the hook because he has plans for this kid. He pulls him aside and starts his questioning. Watching this kid fold is just hilarious. He's eventually cuffed and taken to the police station for further examination, and that's when it happens. This kid breaks down and snitches on the entire group. That's right. He tells the officers that they were all intoxicated and disposed of the evidence in the lake. That's one way to make sure no one hangs out with you ever again. But at the same time, I do kind of feel bad for him. It's kind of unfair how everyone was let off the hook while he was taken in custody. Crazy grad party leads to arrests.
But here's the problem that I've got is we've got open containers of alcohol. I know there are minors here because some of them were kids that I used to teach when I was in school. Okay? So someone's getting charged with an open house party today, a second-degree misdemeanor. All right?
You know it's going to end badly when adults are involved in the mix. This was supposed to be an ordinary high school grad party. You know, a couple of drinks, some weed, and a large group of underage kids indulging. And judging from the clips we've seen in this video so far, the cops are usually okay with letting them off the hook, as long as there's nothing serious going on. But when you get a bunch of drunk teenagers and adults under the same roof, things can go bad real quick. And that's exactly why the cops had to raid and arrest multiple adults from this party. If you ask me, this whole scene could not have been handled any better.
All right, sir. Sorry about what's going on. I'll talk with you in just a minute, okay? But yeah, if you want to start taking video evidence for insurance, whatever you got to do.
The deputy genuinely cares about these teenagers, and at one point in the footage, he even tells them to do whatever they have to do to leave, because if they don't, they're going to get arrested. As for the big boys, he didn't even bother hearing what they had to say and cuffed them immediately. Also, did you see how badly they wrecked the house? It seems like a rental, and the owner is going to have a nightmare when they find out. High school grad party goes national. Speaking of nightmares, this one was a real mess. These drunk teenagers have clearly lost it, as you can see some of them standing on the roofs of houses. But that's not all. Some of them are even trying to light up a fire in the neighborhood. And with so much liquor going around, it's obvious there's going to be a few clashes. But just as things are about to get nasty, the cops finally show up. And it takes 5 different police agencies to break up the party and prevent anything serious. They move in quickly and even pepper spray some rowdy teenagers to shut them down, along with making several arrests. There's also a fire brigade present to put out a fire. These teenagers are seriously lucky nothing bad happened. I mean, just think about it for a second. Imagine if the fire had spread. The entire neighborhood would have burned down, and that's going to be worth way more than just a night in jail. In retrospect, I don't think the police wanted anything to do with these guys. All they were trying to do was set up a perimeter for the firefighters to do their job. There's no getting away.
Get back, get back, get back, get back.
If you're watching this video with a grad party around the corner, here's a piece of advice. I'd advise you not to go, but if you don't want to miss out, just don't fight the cops when they show up, or you'll end up like this lot over here. Here's some context. These high schoolers threw the perfect grad party lining up with Halloween. It's like 100 times cooler now since you have people showing up in their costumes. But unfortunately, it doesn't last too long as the police show up and quickly shut it down. Several arrests are made, but here's where the real trouble happens. While the police are making an arrest, some drunk kids decide to attack them in the hopes of freeing their friends. That is perhaps the biggest mistake you can ever make. Before you were allowed to leave since you're not an adult, but now you've just assaulted an officer, and that has consequences. As she's being arrested, you can hear her yell out how she's only 15 years old. Well, if you're only 15, what were you doing at that party? And secondly, why are you attacking an officer? If you ask me, it seems like this bunch wanted to get arrested. Another entitled brat bites the dust. And while this isn't exactly a high school grad party, there are still plenty of underage teenagers hanging around. But what I really like about this footage is how the cops had a clear plan to gather all the information. When they first raid the party, everyone exiting has to hand over their IDs and look directly into the camera. The funniest part is when they bust this dude in the pink hiding in the shower. Anyway, some people try hanging back and get confrontational with the cops, but the host politely tells them she's okay and that she'll have no trouble handling the situation. Well, if her definition of handling the situation involves throwing a tantrum, then sure. When everyone has exited the premises and it's only the officers and the host, she turns into the most entitled brat ever. The party was called off because of a noise complaint, and this young lady had the audacity to question why her neighbors chose to live here. I mean, that's crazy. But when she realizes there's no getting out of this, she flips and starts going on about how she's a student at the college and sometimes they just have to have some fun. Sure, by all means, have all the fun you want, but when you have underage teenagers getting drunk in your apartment, disaster is bound to happen. In a way, she's lucky the cops showed up at the right time to shut things down. No going home tonight. Block all the exits, assemble everyone in a line, and have them take a breathalyzer at the front door. The police could not have come up with a better way to raid this high school grad party. There's no going home tonight, kids. Everyone who tests positive for alcohol is going to jail. And guess what? There were around 70 people at the party, out of which at least 50 tested positive for underage drinking and possession. Another boat raid. When an officer pulls up to this reckless boat party and accuses them of littering, you'd probably think they're just throwing all their garbage in the water. But nope, they're actually chucking all of the beer since they're all underage. I'm not sure whether this is a grad or birthday party, but either way, these kids have some explaining to do. They claim to have no alcohol on board, but it doesn't take long for an officer to find an entire crate full of beer, not to mention all of the full cans they chucked in the bushes. After checking all of the boats, the police tell the kids to get their IDs out and give them their parents' numbers, and that's when everyone loses it. You can hear them crying about how their relationship with their parents will be ruined and how their parents will think they've been getting drunk the entire time. Crazy grad party gets out of hand. I'm not going to lie, this grad party seems pretty fun. Everyone's vibing to the music and having a good time. That is, until the cops show up. Watch how all these teenagers run from the popo in this surprisingly quiet neighborhood. There's at least 100 of them there. And this isn't just one cop we're talking about. If you look in the distance, you'll see an entire squad coming to investigate this party. The host even records himself dumping all the liquor as if the cops aren't going to check all that out later. And the most ironic bit? He literally uploaded a vlog about this several days later. I'm not too sure about the backstory, but word is, this kid eventually got in serious trouble after the cops informed his parents about the liquor. They were all underage, and this dude was booked for arranging it. Anyway, that's it for today's video, folks. So what do you think? Do you have any stories about high school grad parties that ended in disaster? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more interesting content in the future.